Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to continue with my coverage of the John Wick movies. I said back when I went through the first one, the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one too, by the way, that I was also going to cover the spinoff that falls in between those movies. And that is Ballerina, of course. And I saw that movie last night. I'm gonna give you all I know, plus the pictures and the cast photos. And I'm gonna talk about the story. I'm gonna tell you what I found interesting and what I found to be having an influence on me. And I'll talk about those things. First, I want to cover some other things. To begin with, if you might hear some thumping in the background, that is actually the sounds of Tomorrowland, which is not too far away from here. And if you listen well, you can hear that. And before I start with talking about Ballerina, I'm going to give you the disclaimer first. So, first off, I am not an original English speaker, so on occasion I might still flub a word, or I might also have an awkward pause as I'm trying to look for the right word to convey what I'm talking about in the moment. Also, sometimes I get ahead of myself or I lose my train of thought, and that might lead to a pause, an awkward pause. And I also want to say that occasionally I might swear, or not. I think I've done an episode or two now where I have talked without swearing, and if it happens, it happens. I also want to mention that my text is on the screen, so that means that the screen is gonna get lighter. I'm gonna get brighter, I mean. So the screen will get brighter, I will get brighter because of it. And I want to start first by talking about the larger picture of this beloved franchise, the John Wick movies. You got 1, 2, 3, and 4 right there. And I said in my coverage when I was doing those movies that Ballerina falls in the timeline when it comes to those movies. So this is the poster of the Ballerina movie. Now, I know officially it's supposed to mean from the world of John Wick, Ballerina. I'm not going to say that completely because it's a mouthful. I'm just going to call it Ballerina. And of course, as you saw in this picture, you have all our main characters right here. Most importantly, the one I'm pointing to right now, Ana de Armas as Eve Maccaro. And I will talk about her right now. I want to first point out for a moment where this spin-off falls again. And that is between these two, between 3, Parabellum, and number 4. And actually, I will talk about that in a moment because that does come up. We actually get to see John in this movie too. Okay, but let's start first with this episode. So, we start this movie with a prologue of a young girl and her father, and it quickly becomes evident that this is Eve and her father, Javier. And Javier used to be an assassin of the Ruska Roma. The Ruska Roma is how would you say it? is one of the organized crime organizations underneath the high table. I'm briefly looking up. Yeah, they are mainly from Russia and the Russian-speaking countries, and it is a criminal organization. And the main characters in this spin-off and in the John Wick franchise are from the Ruska Roma originally. And yeah, let's continue. I just wanted to mention that for a moment. So, we get a prologue of Eve and her father Javier from the Ruska Roma crime family. And as they're confronted with another organization simply called the Cult. And Javier, in this prologue, shows off that he is a very gifted assassin, and he gets a lot of action in this moment as he barely has any firearms to use against the people of the cult coming after them. And the cultists themselves are a little bit oddly equipped themselves. They kind of have like a full body armor thing and helmets, but then they also use like high-tech crossbows and the usual daggers and guns and sidearms and all of that. And so we get a lot of scenes. We get a sequence full with action where Javier really shows off what he can until ultimately he is pinned to the floor, about to be taken out, and he hopes that Eve stays silent because she's a child in this prologue, and she doesn't. She yells out for him and then allows him to revert everything back to the action as we see it in the movie, and he gets her out of the place where they are, but not without getting shot again as he helps her escape. And she so he got shot while trying to help her escape, and unfortunately she sees him die, and this traumatizes her, and so she goes into hiding. She goes somewhere. It's not completely sure where this place is, but we get the next couple of scenes. The next scene with her as she is sitting on a bench, and she's confronted by someone dressed completely in black and with a hat, like one of those old gangster hats. The fedora. I almost didn't think of that name. Yes, so someone completely dressed in black with a fedora hat. And the moment he looks up, we see who it is. It is Ian McShane's character, played by the incredible, and here's his cast photo, Ian McShane, who plays Winston. Apparently he's called Winston Scott, that's his full name. I didn't know that before now. Because, well, I'll get to that. Well, I'll mention this for a moment. So, I've only talked about those movies before. There's also a TV series, The Continental, which tells us more about his life. But I haven't seen that series, so I'm not gonna cover it right now. So, Winston shows up. He acts kind of like a proxy for someone, and he convinces her to go somewhere where she could have something of a life, if not, but most certainly not a normal life. And he brings her to the Ruska Roma in New York. And here she meets the director of this organization, and then I have her picture. Here she is. This is a director played by Anjelica Huston, and she began some talking scenes with the both of them, and the director is kind of business wise, but not completely heartless, as we've seen in the Parabellum movie especially, and in the previous installments as well. And so she takes Eve under her wing, and that leads Eve to train with the Ruska Roma for many, many years. And over the next 12 years, because we get a montage here, where Eve has been training as a ballerina, because she used to be obsessed with ballerinas. She had that, I don't even know what the name is called, but it's like a keepsake with a ballerina twirling around that we see at the very beginning in the prologue. And so for the next 12 years in New York, Eve trains as a ballerina, but also as an assassin and bodyguard for the Ruska Roma. And she, in this time, also adopts a code name, and that is Kikimora. And before I go any further, I'm gonna talk a little about the Kikimora in the folklore. So this is a folklore creature from Slavic mythology who is seen as neither bad or a good spirit. It really depends on, well, this is according to folklore, it depends on the behavior of the homeowner. But lately, in our more recent times, it is seen as a swamp spirit. In fact, in the languages of Slovene, Croatian, and Serbian, it is more seen as a nightmare. And here's a little from the actual mythology. So in those languages I just mentioned, Mora, part of Kikimora, means nightmare. And the story goes that Mara, which is the name of the spirit from the Slav mythology, that she was a dark spirit who took the form of a beautiful young woman who visited men in their dreams and tortured them with their desire, while also dragging the life out of them. And so I wanted to mention that for a moment because it's similar to what happens in this movie, of course, in a different way, because it's way more about killing for Eve. And so during her training, Eve encounters the guy from the franchise, John Wick himself, Mr. Keanu Reeves, who plays this titular role. That's him right here. And he is asking for safe passage to Casablanca, which is what happened in the third movie, in Parabellum. That's this one right here, where he went to go and ask for a way to get to the larger and higher ups of the high table. So, and he went through the Ruska Roma. If you remember from the scenes in the movie, he kind of uses like I'm forgetting the name. It's got that necklace with a cross that he uses to the director, like, give me what I want. And so we meet John in this movie in this moment as Eve confronts him and tells him, like, oh, you're the Baba Yaga. How do you do what you do? And John, in that moment, in this movie, in Ballerina, tries to advise Eve to stop pursuing the violence from her past. And he's unsuccessful. After some time, Eve graduates from the program. And we get a cut in which we cut to a new scene where she has killed a lot of people in a bathroom. And well, I'm going to rephrase for a moment. So Eve manages to graduate from the program of the Ruska Roma after she has killed someone that failed in the program. Yes. And that was basically her final test to finally become a Ruska Roma assassin herself. Operating under the name of Kikimora, of course. And I misspoke a moment ago. So first, Eve gets to graduate, having done her final tests, and the next things that she has to do is try to work herself, and she starts doing jobs for the Ruska Roma. Yes, and this is where that scene with the bathroom comes in. So at first, she has to learn how to protect someone, and we get a couple of scenes with Eve. By the way, I've shown the poster already, but I'll show who plays her once again, because I have to mention, of course, that it is the amazing and beautiful Ana de Armas who plays Eve Maccaro. And so the first thing that she has to do, one of her first jobs, is to protect an heiress of a big fortune. And we see this in the light of a club where she's in contact with someone from the Ruska Roma, her handler, her overseer, Nogi, who we saw a moment ago. Yeah, that picture of her. I'm looking for the name. Nope. Sorry. I thought I had the photo. I'm gonna look it up briefly. Give me a moment, folks. don't know. Okay, I do have the picture. I mean, pictures on the screen, so sorry for that. It was another awkward pause. So, Nogi is played by a woman called Sharon Duncan Brewster, and the name does tell me something, but I can't put my finger on it right now. So, we get a bunch of scenes with Eve in the club where she's trying to protect this heiress called Katya Park, who is played, and I do have a picture of this woman by any chance, by this person right here. I hope I say the name right. So Young, an actress. I believe that is someone from a K-pop band. I'm gonna look it up for just a second. She used to be in a duo called Route Zero. And she's also been in another one called SM Town. Okay, so anyway. Sorry for that. Anyway, so we get a good couple of club scenes with Ana de Armas as Eve Maccaro trying to protect this girl from any people that might want to cause her harm. And in which we get to see those traditional action scenes from the John Wick franchise, now done by Ana de Armas in her role. And well, I want to mention here, for instance, that we've seen that kind of scene before in the John Wick movies, where you have a clearly techno vibe place. And it could be right out of a comic, actually, like a graphic novel. And so Eve manages to protect this girl and get her out of there after she's been attacked. And so the next scene is where I talked about before, and I get a bit wrong in the timeline wise. So Eve has been sent to somewhere. She managed to take out a lot of guys. She ended up in a bathroom, and we get to see her returning. The way it plays, it almost looks like a one shot, despite it being in different areas, as Eve goes from a bathroom into a bar, into a staircase, and then outside. And it looks all seamless, so it kind of looks like one shot. And so that leads her to outside, and here she is attacked by another assassin as she's trying to get out in her fancy car. And during this attack, she manages to take out this assassin, and she notices on his body a specific kind of mark, and that is of the cult. And she identifies it because as a kid, as we've seen in the prologue, these people, the cultists, they identify themselves by having a cut in a cross on their wrists. And so this guy has it. This male assassin has one of those on his wrist. And this sets Eve on a quest of finding out what happened. As she starts to seek for her the vengeance that she's been harboring for so long. And so first up, she shows up at the Ruska Roma and starts to ask the director, again played by Anjelica Huston in this movie, about the cults. But she's dismissed. Not just pushed aside, but the director really tells her that the cult has had a long-standing peace with the Ruska Roma, so intervening with what happened with the cult is really a fast track, a fast lane to causing war, basically, between two criminal organizations that have existed for so long. And that is what the director tells her. And Eve, who has now been triggered by this, of course, decides that she needs to go and find out for herself, because this isn't about the organizations, this is about her and what happened to her family, because her father was killed by the cults long ago. And so was his wife, her mother, who she doesn't learn it in this movie, but, well, she doesn't learn it yet, I'll say. I'll reveal that in a moment when we get to that point. So, Eve disobeys the director of the Ruska Roma, and she goes to a place we've seen many times before in this franchise, the Continental in New York. And here she meets up with our people from before. Of course, the person that we've been missing for a long time, and that is of course Lance Frederik, who plays Caron, the concierge of the Continental. And of course, I've mentioned him already, Ian McShane as Winston, the manager of the Continental in New York. And Eve wants to talk to Winston to get some information about the cult. And he takes her away to another area of the place to talk about the organization called the cult. And he talks about a man called Daniel Pine, who has been staying at the Continental in Prague. I'm going to mention here for a moment that the Continental seem to have a habit of having the rules broken a lot. We've seen it happen in the previous installments of the John Wick franchise, of course, with the New York Continental, of course, and also the Japan Continental from the fourth movie. And also the one in Casablanca, now that I think about it. Which, timeline-wise, has not happened yet. The deconsecration of the New York Continental and the incidents in Japan, and also what happened in Casablanca. Okay, so Winston reveals to her that information about Daniel Pine, and he does this through the secretive way that they have under and for the high table, through that network of people behind the scenes who get the information and push up the bounties for people's heads, and which leads Eve to Prague, where she goes and books a room right next to this guy, Daniel Pine. And we get to see as she walks into the building, when Eve walks into the building. I said Ella a moment ago by mistake, but I'm rectifying that now. So there's people waiting for Eve in the lobby of the Continental in Prague. And those are quite likely people, members from the cult, who are waiting for her. Or waiting for the man in the room of the Continental. This Daniel Pine character. And so she goes to her room, and right next to her room is his. And so Eve infiltrates the room by the window outside of the building. Outside of the building. I mean, let me say it like this. So there's a video game series called Assassin's Creed. In Assassin's Creed, you can go from inside a room to outside a room by going over the ledge and then go to the next room. And so Eve does this in this moment. And she gets in to the room of Daniel Pine. And the first person she sees is a young little girl named Ella. And, well, since I mentioned her, I'm going to say who played her. I think I can find that name. An actress called Ava McCarthy plays Ella. Okay. And so Eve startles Ella by pointing her gun at her. But quickly backs off when she realizes that this is an innocent. This is not someone I'm after. And we get the reveal of Daniel Pine, who is played in this movie by someone that I haven't mentioned before because this is for the first time in this role, in this movie, and that is Mr. Norman Reedus. That's him right here. And of course you will know Norman Reedus from his role in The Walking Dead. And he is Daniel Pine. He's Ella's father. And the two of them have been hiding from the cult, as they have escaped the cult, in fact. Kind of in a similar way as it happened for Eve in the prologue from the beginning of the movie. And they're being watched while this is all happening. Well, this is all happening, being Eve meeting Ella and Daniel. And they're being watched by a guy with a sniper rifle on a roof nearby in Prague. And he gets the information of what is happening to his team leader, because there's a team, of course, from the people that I talked about before, the ones in the lobby of the Continental. And that causes them to go to the room and go and check out what is happening. And the team leader of this team is a woman named Lena, and she's played by this woman right here, Catalina Sandeno Moreno, which sounds like a name that could be... Sorry. So, I was talking about Catalina. It kind of sounds like a name that could perfectly fit well in this franchise. I'm gonna pick up what I just felt. Just a second. closer. Okay. So Ella, played by Catalina. Sorry. With names like Ella and Eve and Lena, it's easy to get mixed up. It's easy to get them mixed up. So, okay. So, Eve discovers that. Let's rephrase for a moment. So, Eve learns from the two of them, from Daniel and Ella, that they're on the run from the cult. But the cult members are already at the Continental in Prague, and they're watching this meeting between them. And because Eve decides to not shoot Ella or Daniel, Daniel feels like he can trust Eve and entrust her to Eve and it's basically a bargain. So Daniel tries to trust Eve so he can give information on the cult to her, and from there on we get another incredible action scenes from this franchise and in this movie in particular, and we get to see just what a badass Ana de Armas is in this role, and we get a bunch of shooting and fighting scenes leading to the three of them going down the hotel to outside of the hotel and trying to get away from the cultists that are trying to kill them. And another one of those cultists finds it in him on to shoot Daniel as they're right outside the hotel. And they basically overpower the three of them. And this other cultist is a guy named Dex, and he's played by a guy called Robert Masser, which sounds like someone that could be from my neck of the woods. Okay, and so the cultists overpower the three of them. They shoot Daniel. Lena finds it in her to incapacitate Eve, and they take Ella away. While they leave Eve with the people of the Continental, as they are hoping. The cult is hoping that the Continental will just do their work for them. And as this was all happening, the Continental staff intervene themselves, and this leads to them in what looks like what's the name? There's a specific word for it. Basically, you get two captured assassins from the cults, and then Eve in the middle. A firing squad. That was the word I was looking for. So Eve manages to convince the Continental that she didn't kill anybody on Continental grounds, because that is a rule. You do not kill someone inside the Continental, because that could get you either excommunicated or executed. And so that's what happens with the other two assassins. They get killed by the staff of the Continental. And Eve decides that since she is somewhere else and without any armaments, she needs to go shopping for some hardware. And so she goes to a place not too far away from an arms, and this is a place of an arms dealer named Frank. And this arms dealer is played by this man right here, Abraham Popola. I hope I said that right. And Frank is just in regular John Wick fashion showing off the menu to Eve, who is very interested in buying or getting these weapons from him. And he gives that in an interesting there's a certain kind of way that these arms dealers will gift the heroine in this case, the weapons. I remember in the first one, the arms dealer in that movie, that was this one right here. That was very much in a fashion. I'm sorry, not fashion. In a eating kind of way. It was with a lot of food references, and that happens another time with the guy in Italy in the second movie. This one right here. And then a third time in the third movie, and a fourth time with the Bowery King in the fourth movie. Yes. So now it is Eve's turn to get her hardware, and the Frank guy. Well, actually, here's a bit of a funny moment, to be honest. He literally says, "Can I be Frank?" And the moment he says that, you notice the name pin he has on, so that the joke falls for you. And as they're doing this, the arms dealer shop gets attacked by the cults, and we get to see Anna again showing off, and she uses the armaments of the weapons dealer shop to these cultists, and this time she does that through mostly the use of grenades, and we see that in various ways, mostly like sticking one on one, pulling the pin, and then getting behind a door, or there's one with a table, like a very heavy table, where she flips over it, and with the grenade stuck in the other guy's, I think it was in his mouth, so his head blasts off. Well, it doesn't break her. I want to bring something up for a moment. So, especially when it comes to these kinds of scenes, usually in these moments with the armaments that they get, there's also usually, especially for John, the suit moments, because in all those pictures that you see of him, he has a fancy suit on, and those fancy suits are also like 100% Kevlar, so nothing can really wound him in that outfit. But that is not the case for Eve, of course. She is not wearing a suit like that, which leads to some moments for her where she needs to patch up wounds and such. And before we go any further, I'm gonna drink for a second because my mouth is dry. Drier than the Sahara. Alright. There we go. So, mostly grenade action scenes with Eve Maccaro against the cultists in the arms dealer shop, and Eve manages to squeeze some more information out of Frank that leads her to a town in Austria called Hallstatt, and she also has to ask him for a ride, and she gets her chance to drive another interesting and very beautiful, fancy car to the place. And I'm trying to figure out in my head right now. So, I've been to Austria before, but I haven't been to Prague. So I'm trying to figure out how far Prague from Hallstatt is. But let's lean into the movie magic for a moment. And so, sometime does happen until Eve gets to the gets to the town of Hallstatt, and here she is almost immediately fired upon by the people in this town because they are all, and each of them, cultists. And it starts very innocently as she's trying to get some information, as tourists often do, trying to go to the tourism center, or like information from a bartender, like you see in a lot of westerns or sci-fi movies. And she does something similar, and she goes and asks for a coffee, only to quickly be pursued by one of the cultists, and we get another action scene from here. And actually, I want to say that this movie is about 80% action and 20% story. But of course, as I have talked about before, especially with the John Wick movies, the action tells a lot of the story. Like what you use, what you wear to protect yourself, what your weapon of choice is. Like, because John and Eve are trained by the Ruska Roma, they're very much experts and masters of martial arts, as we see in the montage in the beginning. And well, we know from the beginning who Eve really is. That's not the same case for John Wick, for instance. Like, we hear his name all the time because he has such a legend built around him, because he's the Baba Yaga. And there's a reason why I'm saying all of that for in a moment. But John Wick's real name is Jordani Jovanovic, if I say that right. And so I wanted to mention that because story is driven for a large part by the action in this movie and in the other action movies of this franchise as well. And I want to say that is also true for the TV series, but I have to check that myself. Okay, so that leads to an all-out war of the cultists, a manhunt basically, or in this case a woman hunt, on Eve. And it starts very innocently at first with the bartender in the place where she is, and then quickly by someone in a suit with a gun, only for Eve to dispatch them in time. And by dispatch I mean kill, of course. But it is dragged out to give you really a show of the action. Alright. And that leads Eve to, interestingly, hold this bartender girl into like the freezer of the place where she is. But after a while, after she is overpowered, because she is in the town where the cultists are centered, where it basically is their town. It's not just that they are an organization living in a place, it's that they own the fucking place. And this leads to Eve being overpowered by this whole organization. That's, well, quite literally a cult. Like another one I can think of right now. Sorry. And she is brought before the leader of the cult, and he has the title of Chancellor. And he discovers the affiliation that she has with the Ruska Roma, as he's been calling with the director, of course. And, well, here it gets interesting, because the Chancellor, I didn't notice the whole time who this person was playing him. But in fact, it is somebody very famous, because the Chancellor is played by nobody else but this gentleman right here, Gabriel Byrne, who, and I hope I get this right, I'm gonna look it up for a moment, just to be sure. Or maybe I am... he's an actor. He used to play in a couple of movies like Hereditary and The Usual Suspects, and a movie I've seen years ago, The Man in the Iron Mask. And so he plays the big villain of the movie, the Chancellor of the cult. I want to briefly mention that I was mistaken myself. I thought for a moment that this was that singer from Talking Heads, because he has the same name. But no, it's the actor, not the singer from Talking Heads. Okay, let's continue talking about the story. And so the Chancellor, played by Gabriel Byrne, gets like a reverse villain monologue from Eve as she talks about the revenge that she wants for the killing of her father. And she and he go back and forth, and he reveals that actually this Daniel Pine character is his son, and Ella his granddaughter. And actually even more interesting is that the person hunting Eve in Prague, Lena, was actually nobody more than her own sister. Dun dun. Big twist. And I do have to say, they kind of look alike when you think about it. But it actually just threw me, of course, this was a good twist actually. And that leads Eve to conclude that there was a lot of things she didn't know. I actually wanted to say that she's been living a lie, but that's not true. She didn't know everything yet about her family, which is obviously a very common trope in the action movie business. But Eve manages to break free, and she gets out of there until she is cornered by Lena herself. And of course, as said already, who plays Lena, that is Catalina Sandino Moreno. You know what, I'll show the picture of her again. That's her right here. And so Lena confirms to Eve that they are in fact sisters. And also that Daniel and Ella are family of theirs too. But that's not what Lena says. But what Lena does say is that her father, Javier, by the way, I've been talking about that man quite a lot, but haven't showing you who plays him, and that is this gentleman right here, David Castaneda. I hope Castaneda, I'm sorry, who plays Javier Maccaro in the flashback in the prologue. And so Lena tells her that her father abandoned her when he was escaping with Eve from the cult, because Javier feared that the cult had already deeply indoctrinated Lena. And as Lena and Eve are talking, the Chancellor hears from his people that Lena is actually revealing a lot of stuff to her sister. He decides that I want them dead. Kill him quick. And so the place where Lena and Eve are in is set on fire. And well, it seems obvious to say this again because it keeps happening in this movie, but Eve escapes only now with the knowledge of her family and with more of her family dying as Lena unfortunately bites the bullet and is killed by her own family. Her own father was willing to kill her. By conduit, of course, because someone did it. He said to his men, and men in plural, I mean, to light up the place where Lena and Eve were talking. And this leads the Chancellor to call the director back up so he can declare war on the Ruska Roma because of Eve, because she was trained there. And I'm gonna show the person again. The director played by Anjelica Huston. And the director says to the Chancellor that Eve is not really working for the Ruska Roma anymore. She has gone rogue and offers up a solution for someone else to come and finish Eve for going rogue on the Ruska Roma, fixing a problem between them, which would then lead to a truce again between the two organizations. And of course, that is nobody else but John Wick. And as Eve is running away from the cultists, he arrives in Hallstatt. And we get a brief but interesting fight between the two, as they're very much alike, but also not. Because John is fighting for staying alive and honoring his wife's wishes, while Eve is on a revenge tour on the cultists. And he doesn't want to fight her. And he keeps saying that to her as she tries to push him away, quite literally, because she's fighting him, or rather trying to, because he is such an expert in what he's been doing all his life, killing people. But he's specifically not doing that in this moment because he knows that she is one of the few that could actually stand against these organizations underneath the table, the high table, and the high table themselves. Just like we've seen in the other movies with people like a Winston, for instance, someone that lives by the rules and has to live by the rules actually, but who is very capable of using the rules against the High Table themselves. Just like, and timeline-wise, this hasn't happened yet, but just like the Tracker and the Harbinger in number 4, these are people that can actually stand against the High Table. And so John keeps her at bay. It doesn't kill her. And ultimately this leads to him giving her a bit more time to complete what she wants to do. And he gives her until midnight to break up the cult by killing the Chancellor. And if it doesn't happen, he will complete his contract of killing her for going rogue on the Ruska Roma. And that leads to Eve getting away from John and into the bigger places of the buildings in Hallstatt, which leads to her in the armory, where she loads up on, well, the usual guns and daggers and throwing knives, but then something even more interesting, which then follows into what I would characterize as good cinematic moments, as we have a Rainfall by Night sequence, which is beautifully lit up by the way she is fighting against the cult, because she manages to retrieve a fucking flamethrower and a flame-resistant jacket that she has on. And with the flamethrower, she manages to kill a lot of the cultists, including that Dex guy I was talking about earlier, who seems a bit too much of a badass himself to get one of those flamethrowers himself and try to take her out as well, as you see in the movie. And that ultimately gets Eve to the Chancellor again, as he's trying to flee with his granddaughter, with Ella. But finally, Eve manages to corner them by taking out the car, which leads her face to face with the Chancellor again. We don't really know his first name, so I literally have to use that title, of course. And at first he really tries to reason with Eve, and he gives like a very salad soup argument against her, but she's just so done with all of this shit that she shoots him mid-villain monologue straight in the fucking head. And sorry, a lot of curse. Okay. And so she shoots him, kills him. And we also see this through the eyes of John as he is following this along from a distance with a rifle, with a scope. And for those who don't know what a scope is, it's basically like the larger thing atop a rifle to look far away, close by, like binoculars basically for weaponry. Okay. And so we see through John's eyes that Eve kills him and rescues Ella. And this results into John telling the director of the Ruska Roma that the Chancellor is now dead, and she accepts this because now there is no more war or supposed war between the Ruska Roma and the cult. And we get the final couple of scenes from this movie as we see that Daniel Pine has actually survived the assault from the cults in Prague, and he's recovering. And we see him ask Ella to come to him as he's lying in a hospital bed, recovering from his wounds. And we get a cut to Eve back in the New York Continental, where she meets up with Caron and Winston. Now that she has officially left the Ruska Roma, but he, in his fancy way of talking, tells her that you cut the head of the snake, but now the body will come after you. Meaning that there's still quite a lot of cultists out there who want your head. Pun intended. And we finish this movie by Eve watching a performance of the play by Tchaikovsky, The Swan. Is it Swan Lake or Black Swan? Can I briefly look that up for you guys? Yeah, Swan Lake. My bad. I don't know all that much about old stuff. Old stuff, I mean. Okay, so that is where the movie ends, as Eve is attending this Swan Lake play in which her friend Tatiana is performing. But then she is distracted by the number of money that has been put on her head, especially the $5 million that has been put on there by the behind the scenes personnel of the underworlds under the table. And so she leaves the theater. And that is where this movie ends. And this episode of the podcast also ends. So I don't really do reviews, but I have to say though that I 100% enjoyed this movie. It is, like I said, 80% action, 20% story, but it's all interloped because action tells a lot of the story, especially in these movies. And I have to say, Ana de Armas is a badass in this movie, and I urge you to go and see him too if you haven't seen it yet. And I want to thank you for watching and listening to me rattle and talk about this movie. It is a great movie. I don't really do reviews, but I will say this is, for me, a 9 out of 10. And I don't usually do ratings. So, from the world of John Wick, Ballerina, go and see it. This is the FWX podcast. I am Frederik. Before I end off, I want to ask you, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel. You can also like this video if you like. And you can also comment in the comment section and talk about what you think of the movie, how I'm doing in these episodes. And also, I'm glad to see you in the next video. And I will see you soon.